Not a set. Not a soundstage. Not the wide-angle glory of Monument Valley with its red towers catching gold light at magic hour. This is a real street, cracked asphalt, sodium lamp half burned out overhead. The kind of block where the city forgets to look. The year is 1953. The city is Los Angeles. The month is November, and the Santa Ana winds have died down just enough to let the cold settle into the concrete. A woman walks alone. She's moving fast, not running, because running draws attention, but fast. Heels on pavement, a shopping bag in her left hand. Her right hand pressed flat against her coat like she's trying to hold herself together from the inside. She doesn't look behind her. She doesn't have to. She can feel him, 30 feet back, matching her pace exactly. The way only one kind of man matches a woman's pace on a dark street. She turns a corner. He turns the corner. She crosses to the other side. He crosses to the other side. And then, from a doorway that had been completely dark a moment before, a figure steps out. 6 feet 4 inches. 220 pounds. Hands the size of baseball mitts, hanging loose at his sides. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't need to. The man following her stops. The woman stops. And for 4 seconds, for very long seconds, nobody on that entire block moves. This is that story. Los Angeles in November of 1953 was a city running on borrowed confidence. The post-war boom had built it wide and fast, freeways still being poured, neighborhoods still being invented, whole hillsides scraped flat to make room for the next version of the American dream. Hollywood was 60 miles of illusion stretched across a basin, and after dark, when the cameras stopped rolling and the lights came down, the city underneath showed its real face. The neighborhood near West 7th Street and Hoover, just south of where the streetcar lines used to run before they were quietly dismantled, was the kind of place that existed in the gap between what Los Angeles wanted to be and what it actually was. Apartment buildings 4 stories high, laundry lines across the alleys, corner stores with iron grates on the windows even before closing time. Working people's territory. The people who built the sets and drove the trucks and ran the steam presses that kept the dream looking pressed and clean. On the night of November 14th, 1953, a Saturday, the temperature had dropped to 47 degrees by 10 in the evening. A light marine layer had moved in from the coast, turning the street lamps into soft halos of orange and gray. The sidewalks were largely empty by that hour. The bars had their regulars. The diners had their late shift crowd. But the streets themselves belonged mostly to people with somewhere to be and not enough money for a cab. Her name was Elena Vargas. She was 26 years old, a seamstress at RKO Studios, one of 43 women in the costume department who spent their days bent over industrial sewing machines producing the invisible labor that made stars look like stars. She lived in a 3rd-floor apartment on Hoover, 4 blocks from the bus stop. On Saturdays she worked a half shift, picked up groceries from the market on Vermont, and walked home. She had done this walk 43 times since moving to the neighborhood in January. She knew every crack in the sidewalk. She did not know the man who began following her that night from the corner of 7th and Hoover. His name, it would later be established, was Gerald Pruitt. He was 31 years old, 5 feet 10 inches, 185 pounds, with a record of 2 prior complaints filed with the LAPD that had produced no charges. The system working precisely as it was designed to work in 1953, which is to say, not working at all for women who reported men following them home. Pruitt had been drinking at a bar called The Anchor 2 blocks away. He had been there since 6 in the evening. He had had 4 beers and 2 shots of rye, and when Elena walked past the bar's front window at 9:47, something in him made a decision that he had made before. He followed her out the door. She felt him before she heard him. That particular awareness that lives in the nervous system of women who walk alone at night. Not paranoia, but the body's ancient alarm, built from 10,000 years of being the smaller one in the dark. The hair on the back of her neck. The sudden clarity of every sound. The calculation. How far to the corner? How far to the door? How far to anywhere safe? She had 280 feet to her building's front entrance. Pruitt was 30 feet behind her, and he was not in a hurry. What neither of them knew was that a man had parked his car, a 1952 Ford Country Squire station wagon, dark blue, on the north side of Hoover 40 minutes earlier. He had been visiting a friend. Not a famous friend, not an industry dinner. A working man named Roy Brennan who had done set carpentry on 3 of his pictures and whose wife had just had a difficult surgery. He had brought food. He had sat with them for 2 hours. He had turned down 3 offers of whiskey because he was driving, and he had said goodnight at 9:30 with the kind of quiet that meant he had actually meant every moment of being there. He was walking back to his car. He came around the corner of Hoover heading south, and in the half second it takes the human eye to process the geometry of a street, he understood exactly what he was looking at. He didn't move the way other men moved. He stopped. Completely. Not a flinch, not a stumble. A deliberate, absolute stillness, the kind you develop over 20 years of knowing when to be patient and when to be a wall. He was wearing a plain brown overcoat over a gray work shirt. No hat. His hair was slightly wind-pushed. There was nothing about him, not his clothes, not his posture, not the way he was standing, that announced anything to the world. Nothing except his size. And his stillness. And the fact that his eyes, once they located Gerald Pruitt, did not move. He stepped out of the doorway. Not toward Pruitt. Not toward Elena. He simply stepped into the center of the sidewalk, directly between the two of them, and stopped. That was the moment Elena Vargas turned around. John Wayne had been in 102 films by November of 1953. 102 pictures, starting from the anonymous bit parts in the late 1920s. The kid from Glendale who carried props and watched and kept watching. All the way through Stagecoach, through Red River, through She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, through The Quiet Man the year before, which had earned him the kind of approval from critics who had spent 15 years telling audiences he couldn't act. He stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed between 215 and 225 pounds depending on the shoot, and he moved. Through his daily life with the particular physical confidence of a man who has never had to prove anything to a room. He didn't carry himself the way athletes carry themselves. No performance of power, no widened stance, no deliberate projection. His size was simply a fact, the way a building is a fact, and he used it the way very large men either learn to use it or don't, by becoming still, by letting it exist without calling attention to it, which paradoxically called more attention to it than any display of force could have managed. The hands were what people noticed first, the ones who spent any real time around him. Not the face. The face was famous, overexposed, reproduced on posters from here to Tokyo. The hands. John Ford, who had directed him in 9 films by that point, once said that Wayne's hands told you everything the scripts couldn't. They were working hands. The hands of the boy from Winterset, Iowa, who moved to Glendale with his family and got a scholarship to USC and lost it and ended up on a Fox studio lot moving furniture and wrangling props under director John Ford's occasional withering gaze. The knuckles were large. The grip, when he offered a handshake, left an impression. On the night of November 14th, those hands were at his sides. Open. Not clenched. Not raised. Just present, the way the rest of him was present. Fully, quietly, without announcement. Gerald Pruitt saw him at the same moment Elena saw him step into the sidewalk. There was a friend of Wayne's from the production offices at Republic Pictures, a unit manager named Hal Dresser who heard this story from Wayne directly and told it 3 times in his life before his death in 1979, who said that when Wayne described the moment, he used only one phrase about what he was thinking when he stepped into that sidewalk. I figured standing there was enough. But here's where it changes. Pruitt didn't stop immediately. He was drunk and he was committed in the way that certain men get committed to a course of action, and his first response to the large figure materializing between him and Elena was not retreat. It was confusion, followed by the very specific kind of masculine irritation that substitutes for thought in certain moments. He took 2 more steps forward. He was now 18 feet from Wayne, and Wayne had not moved a single inch. There is a particular quality to genuine physical stillness that is almost impossible to fake, and it is different, completely different, from the frozen-in-fear stillness of someone who doesn't know what to do. The second kind has a quality of held breath to it, a vibration of suppressed panic that the body broadcasts whether it wants to or not. The first kind, the kind that comes from a person who has made a decision and is waiting, has no vibration at all. Gerald Pruitt had been in 2 bar fights in his life, had won one and lost one, and had spent enough time around men to know, in the most immediate animal part of his nervous system, which kind of stillness he was looking at. He stopped walking. 11 feet now. The sodium lamp overhead threw a long shadow from Wayne's left shoulder down the sidewalk toward Pruitt's feet. The street was silent except for the sound of a radio from an apartment window up above, a baseball score being read on a late sports report, somewhere warm and domestic, and completely removed from what was happening on the pavement below. Elena Vargas, in the account she gave to Hal Dresser's wife many years later. The account that eventually reached Dresser himself, said that in the moment she turned and saw Wayne standing there, she did not recognize him. Not immediately. She saw a large man, standing between her and the person who had been following her, and what she felt was not celebrity or Hollywood or the weight of 102 films. She felt the specific physiological relief of weight lifting off her chest cavity. She described it as the feeling of a door closing between her and something dangerous. She pressed herself against the wall of a building to Wayne's left, and she waited. Pruitt looked at Wayne. Wayne looked at Pruitt. The 4 seconds that Hal Dresser's account describes as the silence of that standoff were not, apparently, spent in any dramatic visual confrontation. No narrowed eyes, no squared jaws. Wayne simply stood there and looked at the man with the patient, unperformative attention of someone who has already finished thinking through the situation and is now simply present in its conclusion. It was Pruitt who spoke first. "The hell are you supposed to be?" he said. Not a question. The flat, belligerent declaration of a man trying to hold on to a position he had already lost. Wayne said nothing. And in that specific silence, not the silence of someone who hasn't thought of a response, but the silence of someone who has decided a response is unnecessary, something in Pruitt's posture changed. Hal Dresser, relaying Wayne's description, said it this way. Duke said the fella's shoulders moved first. Before anything else, the shoulders went down. The body knows before the mind admits it. Pruitt took one step back, then another. Then he turned around, not slowly or dramatically, but with the slightly mechanical movement of a man operating on a revised set of instructions. And he walked back the way he had come, past the corner, and out of the reach of the sodium lamp. What happened next, nobody expected. Wayne didn't watch him go. He had turned around before Pruitt had fully retreated, and he was looking at Elena Vargas. There are moments in a person's life when the ordinary machinery of language, the pleasantries, the social scripts, the practice sentences that hold daily interactions together, simply doesn't have the right parts for the job. Elena Vargas, pressed against the wall of that building with a grocery bag in her left hand and 4 months of careful Saturday night navigation, now rearranged in the span of 60 seconds, found herself looking up at a face she had, in fact, seen before, on a poster outside a theater on Broadway. On the front page of a magazine in the costume department's break room. On a billboard she passed on the bus. She said afterward that she didn't know what to say, that she opened her mouth and what came out was not "thank you" or "I know who you are," but simply the particular sound of someone exhaling a breath they've been holding for 4 blocks. Wayne waited until she had made that sound. Then he spoke. He didn't ask her if she was all right. He didn't narrate what had just happened or offer a summary of events or perform any of the reassuring theatrics that the situation might have seemed to invite. What he said, and this is the line Hal Dresser used every time he told this story, was simply, "Which way are you going?" She pointed toward her building. He said, "I'll walk." Not "I'll walk you." Not "let me walk you." Just "I'll walk." As if the destination was already understood, and the only question was logistics. They walked the remaining 280 feet to her building in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. The silence of 2 people who have just been through something together that doesn't need to be talked about, at least not immediately. At the front door of her building she found her keys and unlocked the lobby door, and she turned to him, and this time she did say "thank you." And she said it the way you say it when you mean something specific and not something general. Wayne nodded once. He waited until she was through the door. He waited until he heard the interior door close behind her. Then he walked back to his station wagon, started the engine, and drove home. He didn't call anyone that night. He didn't tell a reporter. He didn't mention it to his publicist or his producer or his agent. Hal Dresser heard the story 6 weeks later, not because Wayne volunteered it, but because Dresser happened to mention the neighborhood in conversation. He'd been looking at a place in that area, and Wayne, almost as an aside, as a postscript to a different point entirely, described what had happened there on a November night. Dresser asked him why he hadn't said anything before. Wayne looked at him with the particular expression of mild bewilderment that his close associates described as his version of confusion. Not at the world, but at the question. "What would I say?" he said. She walked home safe. This is the philosophy beneath the stillness. Not silence as performance. Not silence as modesty. Silence because the only meaningful unit of measurement was the outcome, and the outcome had been fine, and everything that would have been said about it afterward would have been about something other than that. That is not reticence. That is proportion. The demonstration on that sidewalk lasted, from the moment Wayne stepped out of the doorway to the moment Pruitt turned and walked away, approximately 45 seconds. There were no witnesses except Elena Vargas. No photographs. No contemporary accounts. What was documented, what passed into the small, quiet chain of transmission that eventually surfaces stories the world almost loses, was the description Wayne gave to Hal Dresser and the account Elena gave to Dresser's wife, Dorothy, in 1961 when Elena had moved to a different neighborhood and worked in a different department, and the distance of 8 years had made the story speakable. What those two accounts share, and this is the thing that makes them credible to each other, since neither party knew the other had spoken, are the same 4 seconds of silence. Both of them, independently, counted the same duration. Both of them described the same quality of stillness from Wayne. Both of them noted that he never raised his hands. In the first second, Wayne stepped fully into the center of the sidewalk. His weight shifted to his left foot, a detail Elena noticed because of the sound of his shoe on the pavement, the specific creak of leather sole on broken concrete. His hands remained at his sides, open. In the second, Pruitt's forward motion stopped. Not because anyone told it to, but because the body processed information that the mind was still arguing with. In the third second, there was absolute silence on that block. The radio from the apartment above was between songs. The distant sound of a car on the cross street had passed. Elena held her breath. Pruitt stood at 11 feet and experienced the particular sensation of a man who has made a mistake discovering the full dimensions of that mistake. In the fourth second, and this is the second that both accounts pause on, that both descriptions return to with a kind of wondering specificity, Wayne did not look away. He did not blink or shift or signal in any physical way that the situation was in doubt. He looked at Pruitt with the complete, unperformative attention of a man who has finished making decisions and is now simply being the result of them. That was enough. 20 years working in Hollywood had given Wayne something that actors who came up through formal training often took longer to find, and some never found at all: the ability to do nothing fully. To be so completely present in a moment that presence itself becomes the statement. On camera, Ford had worked for years to get that quality out of him. To stop him from doing things and let him simply be things, to trust. The stillness instead of filling it. By 1953, Wayne had learned it so thoroughly that it had crossed the border from technique into character. He didn't project. He didn't fill the space. He simply occupied it completely, the way a physical fact occupies space. Pruitt, whatever his state of mind in the days before that night, was not stupid. He was a man who had made a bad decision and then walked into the wall of its consequences. He read the situation with the particular accuracy of someone who has something to lose and has just fully understood what standing in front of him represents. Not just size, though size was part of it. Not just the famous face, though somewhere in the back of his processing, he may have registered it. What stopped Gerald Pruitt was the absence of performance. A man who is performing his threat needs you to react to it, needs the tableau, needs the escalation, needs you to engage with the theater of the moment. Wayne offered him nothing. No raised eyebrows, no widened stance, no hand on the collar or weight shifted forward. Just the steady, unbreakable fact of his presence, holding the center of that sidewalk with the complete patience of someone who will still be standing there in an hour if necessary. The crowd went silent. In this case, the crowd was one woman and a dark street. And in that silence, Pruitt found himself alone with the full arithmetic of his situation. He walked away. Wayne stepped back. He turned around. He looked at Elena Vargas the way you look at someone after the immediate thing is resolved and the human thing begins. They did not have a long conversation. Wayne was not a man who extended moments for the sake of extending them, and Elena, practical, working, a woman who had learned to navigate the city on her own terms, did not need him to. What was said in those 280 feet was said in the grammar of presence rather than the grammar of speech. He walked at her pace, slightly to her left, in the position that physically blocked the street side. He did not take her bag. He did not take her arm. He simply walked, and the manner of his walking said what it needed to say. At the door, when she thanked him, he nodded once. Hal Dresser asked him, 6 weeks later, if he had thought about following Pruitt, calling the police, making sure the man was identified, doing something that extended beyond the block. Wayne sat with the question for a moment. He was eating, Dresser later recalled, a plate of scrambled eggs at a diner in the valley, and he put down his fork and he said, "She was safe." That was the job. That is the philosophy made explicit. Not every problem requires its own monument. Not every intervention requires its own aftermath. The question, "What do I do about this?" has only one real answer. You do the thing that resolves it, at the scale that resolves it, and then you stop. The instinct to make it larger, to carry it forward, to attach it to your own name. That instinct is almost never about the person you're protecting. Wayne had spent 30 years in an industry built entirely on the performance of action, on the packaging of decisive moments into mythologies, on the retelling of heroism until the telling became more important than the thing. He had played the hero so many times that he understood, with complete clarity, what real heroism actually looked like. It looked like scrambled eggs at a diner 6 weeks later. It looked like the shrug of a man who had done a normal thing that happened to be necessary. The other party in this story, Elena Vargas, carried the moment differently. Not as a monument, but as a correction. As proof of something she had needed proof of. That the geometry of a dark street is not fixed. That the equation of a woman alone and a man following can have a different solution than the one it usually does. That size and stillness, and the decision to step into the center of a sidewalk at 9:47 on a November night, that these things are available, and when they are used correctly, they change the outcome without ceremony. She never forgot the way he said, "I'll walk." The absence of a pronoun. The absence of any structure that required her to be grateful in a specific direction, to position herself as someone who had been rescued. Just 2 words that meant, this direction, this pace, this moment, together. 1 line. 2 words. And she walked home safe. Gerald Pruitt was arrested 14 months later, in January of 1955, on a charge that was not following a woman on a dark street, because in 1953 that was not yet the thing you were arrested for. He spent 60 days in the county jail. What happened to him after that is the kind of record that dissolves into time and ordinary consequence. Elena Vargas left RKO in 1956, when the studio restructured and laid off 40% of the costume department. She found work at Desilu Productions, where she eventually became a senior pattern maker. She married in 1958. She had 2 children. She lived in the San Fernando Valley, and she took her daughter on her first bus ride when her daughter was 4 years old, and at some point, her daughter told this story at her mother's funeral in 2004. Elena had pointed out a particular intersection near West 7th Street and said, quietly, that something good had happened to her there once, a long time ago. Her daughter asked what. Elena said, "A man walked with me." John Wayne made 5 more films between 1953 and 1955. He won no awards for any of them. The thing he did on a sidewalk on Hoover Avenue in November of 1953 does not appear in any biography, any filmography, any commemorative volume. It left no photograph, no police report, no studio memo. It exists only in the chain of human memory. Dresser to his wife to Elena, Elena to her daughter, and in the particular quality of an outcome that almost didn't happen. 31 witnesses would see John Wayne in some of his greatest cinematic confrontations. 300 would crowd the set of The Sons of Katie Elder. Thousands would line the sidewalks at premieres. That night on Hoover Avenue, his audience was one woman and a dark street. He performed for neither of them. He simply stepped out of a doorway and stood in the center of the sidewalk and waited. That's not acting. That's character. And character, unlike performance, doesn't require an audience. Here is what the night on Hoover Avenue tells us, distilled to its essentials. The loudest thing in that confrontation was the silence. The most decisive movement was the one that didn't happen. And the most important 4 seconds in John Wayne's real life may be the 4 seconds no one has ever seen. One man, one street, one decision that history almost forgot entirely. Years after John Wayne's death in 1979, Hal Dresser gave his final account of the story to a historian documenting the working lives of below-the-line Hollywood personnel. He was 81 years old, and he told it the same way he had told it the first time. Not as a tribute, not as a legend, but as a fact about a man's actual character, offered in the same spirit in which the man himself had lived it. He said, "Duke didn't tell me that story because he was proud of it. He told me because I mentioned the neighborhood, and he was being accurate." Being accurate. There is a confrontation from 1957 that John Wayne never discussed. Not with Hal Dresser, not with anyone on record. A situation involving a film set in the Arizona desert, and a man who came very close to making a decision he couldn't undo. What Wayne did in that moment, and why he spent 2 years making sure it was never attached to his name. That's a story for another time. But it starts the same way, with a man standing still, and the world rearranging itself around him.